Welcome back to another episode of KARE-ing Conversations. And I have really been looking forward to this conversation. And I know you have, Jordan. It's a complicated one and it's a difficult one. And I'm not going to, sugarcoat that. And I kind of want to turn it over to you to let our audience know kind of what we're going to be diving into. It is going to be informative and I think eye-opening to help our industry move forward.
Well, we're talking about isms, and it is a tough conversation to talk about isms because you have to bring yourself to a vulnerable place and talk about your privilege and talk about where you are. And often it is hard to say to someone, we understand that you don't make this much, or this is your experiences, or this is where you come from, and this is the population you serve, and all of these isms that are things that you want to address. But as leadership, you often are the one that's responsible for changing this culture. And so how do you talk about these things and not be the one at the end having fingers pointed at you? So we're excited to bring on our guest today, who is Lora Williams, RN. She is the CEO of Williams Career of Excellence, providing demand career training, providing CNA phlebotomy tech, medication aid, HVAC tech, medical assistance, certification prep, and more. The School of Excellence is a wonderful project I'm excited to learn more about. She's also an author of 5 books that consist of children's books and women empowerment books.
Let's go, Lora!
The list of more works that she does is amazing, and I'd love you to tell us more about some of the other things that you're working on.
Yes, welcome.
Yes, thank you. It's exciting. Jordan was like, okay, that's a lot, Lora. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so the school is definitely something that has been more of a 10-year vision for my husband and I, and definitely being a nurse. Our first program that we launched was providing CNA training, just because of the importance of training and equipping individuals to be able to provide care, and also to be able to give them the confidence they need to identify complications, right, within the elderly population. So I'm very passionate, as you can see, about training, right? My books are all about empowering people. I think once you kind of look at my LinkedIn, and if you even have the opportunity to look at my resume, you'll notice that it has to do with people. Everything that I do has to do with caring and providing tools and skills and hopefully leaving people better than where they was when I came.
I love that.
People. It's interesting that the topic that we're talking about, isms, as I often say, a recovering HR professional, we're talking about DEI, and what is the newest iteration of DEI is DEIB, so diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And so people, working in caregiving and then working in that, both of them are focused on people, but in caring for people in different ways. And so we've been talking about this mirror of how we should treat our residents and then how we should treat our staff, and how in this field particularly, all the things that we talk about being person-centered and having opportunities for continuing education and growth, we talk about for our residents, and we rarely have this conversation about our staff. And so let's talk about isms, because one of the things that is you talk about people come in all shapes, sizes, colors, and you have to get them to work together, but then you have to also get them to work to support the care of a person.
Definitely.
So tell me about, just from the top of your head, like what is the biggest, first of all, what is the biggest ism you come across?
I think I would say racism. And I only start with that because I didn't notice it initially. Like, it wasn't, I think sometimes, especially because of my race and culture, people assume that that's almost a knee-jerk response. But honestly, I don't like to pick that first because to me, it feels like a label. And to me, it's almost a strong word to apply to a person, right? So, but now hindsight 2020, being able to look over my career and how I advanced from CNA all the way up to being a director. Even before I got my registered nurse, I was leading organizations, assisted living, memory care facilities, and overseeing caregiving staff from all capacities. Now, when I tell my story to my students, I now understand that my why didn't necessarily start with elevating caregiving staff or CNAs. And that's where I thought it was. When I first would tell my beginning story, that's what I would start with. When I look back, most of my work was challenging leadership and in the way in that and their own internal biases in making decisions and how they treat individuals that don't look like them or come from the same culture that they do. And I don't always think it's a conscious thing, right? I just always want to give people the benefit of the doubt. But I will say that there is a pattern of behavior that is consistent in healthcare industries, in the leadership team, and you can see that. And when you talk and gather data from the staff themselves and people on the ground, they affirm what I saw and observed in those type of facilities.
So without, naming obviously specific people or,
Right.
communities, I want to dive into this though, because I think it's so important to paint a picture, right, of
Yeah.
what this looks like. What are you seeing? What are these problems? And how are you then challenging the leadership to, honestly, correct this behavior?
Yeah, so I have an example that always come to mind
Mm,
initially, and this is one where I got offered the role, very excited, flowers, balloons, woohoo, woo-ha, like, and literally within 24 hours of my first day, my meeting with the leadership team consisted of constant complaints of certain staff members,
Hmm. What do
literally.
certain staff members look like?
hmm.
They look like us,
Right.
right? And I didn't notice it initially. I really, because again, it's not my first thought, but I
Mhm.
did notice. And what I would point out is, so you mean to tell me, I just want to make sure I understand that you blame the entire caregiving team for the quality of care being given. What did you do in response to that? Because it is your responsibility, right? Like to train and develop your team. And then,
100%.
or there will be this singling out of a one person that they felt like was the lead in that, in the morale or the quality that is given, but no one had taken the time to train and teach that staff member or the previous leadership person that I never got to meet, but based on their own report of that individual, they weren't engaged in that process. So I would always scratch my head and just again ask the question, then what did you do about it? Because again, it's your responsibility. If you see that there is a need and you allowed this to happen for 3 years before this opening came, then you also bear the responsibility to ensure that your team is equipped. And if you allow this to happen without giving them the tools, then you might as well put your name on the list too. Like you might as well join the club. So yeah, so that's an example of that.
And then, so your own experience from because I love having, first of all, I love having you here. Thank you so much for being here. Because the question I ask is, okay, so, what then? So we realize the problem and we realize, okay, so you can be a part of the solution. Don't be a problem identifier, be a solution identifier,
Right.
train them.
Yes.
Where's the training? Where's the training?
So really, to be honest, I think that based on the role in this specific capacity. So just to give some terms out there, for assisted living, health and wellness director is almost likened to a director of nursing and skilled nursing. The level of care looks different, but the oversight of the processes are pretty much similar in my perception of that. So really that burden really falls on the nurse. It falls on that director of the team to be able to provide that training. Do I think that's a fair assessment? Maybe not, but I do understand that we do come equipped with those expertise, and who better than to train the staff on the standards than the person that is over that team and individual. But it is a team effort, meaning that the leadership team outside of that department should also be just as duly engaged in that process. So I think I had better success because training and teaching and meeting my staff where they were, because I too started there and understood the different cultures and races and their perception of certain things and how to communicate things to them mattered to me. But the average nurse that has that same role, honestly, they may not have that time nor the support and backup to be able to give that time and investment to their associates.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because when you said that, like, of course, obviously, yes, we, in the roles and hierarchy of our care force, nurses are there to supervise your CNA team.
Right.
But like when you're doing assessments and wound care and med passes and all the other things, and then the occasional emergency, and you're understaffed anyway, so like you gotta do all that and you're understaffed. When do you have time to train people?
Yeah, you really don't. I mean, it's people say time is relative, but in reality, emergencies do happen. Staffing, call-ins, that immediately takes the priority, because you want to make sure that your staff act, in a place that you are able to provide quality care. And let's be honest, this has been an issue. I've been in the industry since I was 16, like more than 20 years. It really hasn't changed in that capacity. Sadly, we haven't progressed. And I think part of it is because of isms. We have not done a good job of understanding the population that actually love and desire to care for people, that they look like us. The main majority of the workforce is us. Mm-hmm. So it would be almost like, duh. I think you need to understand the culture and understand where we are coming from and how to engage and how to communicate, so that we can also feel valued in that space and also develop our skills and even look for the advancement opportunities that may be available.
Go ahead, Jordan.
Oh, well, just have to throw out the demographics for our viewers. 33% of CNAs, and that number is growing, 33% of CNAs are Black. And then so on and so forth. Behind that number is the highest number. After that is Hispanics, and the higher number after that is Asians. And I mean, obviously, people look at the demographics and they're like, well, but still 60% are white. And then, well, duh, we live in America. Majority everywhere is white. But so understanding, like, the majority of our care force and CNAs are Black. I want to pivot because I want to keep the part about racism that we're talking about, but I also want to add in another aspect that we don't ever talk about, which is classism. You have so oftentimes we have this expectation that a CNA is going to come in and they know how to do the job, even though it took 1 to 2 months to get the certification, and a majority, 80% of CNAs don't have any education past a high school diploma. So they on average making $33,000 a year had the time to go and get that extra education and went through all this years of schooling. So they of course are coming in and, why don't you know more? And so there's that. And so we have this expectation of them, and then when they come in and they just don't have the money, they don't have the money to be able to handle all of these other things, to have childcare. I mean, I've been looking at these numbers, and 27% of CNAs need childcare.
Yes.
And a lot of this, even just on supplementary income and government assistance, a lot of this is just resource training, like knowing how to go to these agencies and get these resources. So one of the things that CARE is really happy to talk about and announce, and we just did this, is we launched in a partnership with NACA, the National Association for Healthcare Assistants, this learning management system called CareForce Virtual Campus. And so we are providing free upskilling, free courses, as many courses as they want to take. And one of the things is we're constantly looking at where can we build this education. And so this is all powered by Care Academy. And so one of the things we're just putting in dementia training now, and skills and competencies and things like that. But after having this conversation, just digging into these numbers and seeing where heroes are, maybe we should have some financial planning courses, some here's in your area the resources that you can get, because we realize you don't. But still, Laura, I ask you, is that enough to train the workforce? Where else might we need training?
I would say it's definitely a good start, because you're right that just knowing where things are, accessibility, and also understanding the value, right? Like, if we're honest, the history and almost the stain on the term caregiver CNA, there is a demeaning perception of that. Like, part of my main job is to elevate that standard. And it also starts with, number one, how that caregiver CNA or healthcare professional perceives themselves, but it also has a lot to do with what they're experiencing on the field, in the buildings, right? So if you can, engage with that person and say, I see potential, and we have these opportunities to even develop you further. And that's what I would have to do, because in a lot of times, honestly, they don't see it. And I don't think it's because they're not capable, obviously, right? I think it's because there's not enough of that compliment and that affirming within the industry in their experiences to say, we have these opportunities available to you. We want to see you grow within our organization. And this is what that looks like. I think it's more focused on, we need you to show up and do the job and shut up. Like, I honestly think that's the culture that we've had for years now, and it's something that we have to be very intentional with working on, and providing a partnership like that, where there are getting that training and upskill, because you're right, the training at least can take 4 weeks, and there's some times where it's 2 weeks. And people do. I've had these conversations in a hair salon where this person is like complaining about this caregiver, or in a hospital setting. And I'm like, do you realize, like, we don't even have to teach them that in school. It's not a requirement. Like, oh, I didn't know that. So it is important to take a step back and recognize how much education is being provided, and is the organizations and the leaders willing to invest in that.
And then where are these growth opportunities? Because I always thought that the career path before I got into the field, and when I was in college studying the field, I had said, well, isn't the career path of a CNA to just be an LPN and then they get to be a nurse? But then, like, it costs a lot of money to go to a 4-year. I mean, it costs a lot of money going to a 4-year institution. And definitely, on that average $33,000 salary, and here's another statistic, I've just been throwing numbers out at everyone. Do you know how much the average household spends on expenses? $61,000.
Wow.
So hold on, you have 33,000 is the average wage, and a household on average spends around 61,000. How are they supposed to afford schooling?
Yeah.
Even CEUs. How are they supposed to afford? Now, mind you, there's no organization that requires CNAs to get CEUs, but how do they get those CEUs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow, that's huge. But this is why you see them working 2 and 3 jobs, though.
Yep. that's why you see so many caregivers becoming heroes and joining care, because they need the
Yes.
flexibility and more money. And
Flexibility. Yes. Yeah.
so how do those isms fit into that, and where's the intersectionality of that?
So when I think about classism, I think one thing to be stated, it kind of connects with your initial like introduction. We do invest more time in selling our building in our room and understanding the residents. And you use the big P word, person-centered care. And it never carries over to the care staff. It never carries over to the people that are on the ground and doing the work. For those who don't understand that conversation, what it looks like is we're actually doing a discovery with a resident and their family, and we're understanding all aspects of their history, their past, everything, so that we can be very intentional about the gift, about the experience, even from the first day that they walk into our building. And this can take time, like meetings and assessments and conversations for us to figure out what could be that wow moment, some organizations say. And if you just really think about like, what if we really put even just an ounce of that time in understanding the person that is being interviewed for the caregiver? Like, what is your experience? Because the workforce that we have, they're very loyal. And that's where we're missing out on the value that exists in the individuals that are actually investing their last dime into a program like ours. Is they're very loyal and they're hardworking individuals that need a chance and they need an opportunity.
Could you imagine if we did that for every CNA that walked into our building? Like,
Wow.
what are your passions? What are the names of your children? What are the names of your significant other? What do you like to do when you finish a shift? If you're working a
Yeah.
12-hour shift, what do you do with those 4 days that you're off?
Yeah.
Just like, where can we create a space for you?
Yeah.
Like, if
I,
we actually did move-ins, like we did for residents for our care force, we might not have a workforce problem.
Yeah.
I love that because it makes people feel seen. And that's
Yeah.
kind of one of the things that's been on my mind during this conversation, right? Because I'm thinking about how do we make people feel seen without pandering.
Mm.
And that's, sorry, my camera here we go. But that's like one of my biggest things. Like every time I think about the holidays, right? When I see commercials and it's an LGBTQIA like couple in there, and it feels pandering, or it's an all black family for a Macy's commercial, and I'm just like, I turn away. But I also think it's important, like the uncomfortable thing where white people want to have these conversations with us,
Yeah.
and they care but don't know how to engage. And I
Mm.
guess, Laura, I'd be so interested to hear from you. Besides, I think asking those questions is great, just really understanding the person. But
Yes.
yeah, how do we make our staff feel seen, particularly someone that is not of color, that really probably doesn't want to have this conversation because it's very
It's
uncomfortable.
it's very, very comfortable. Interesting enough, I was just having a similar conversation with my two daughters. What
Mm,
people need to feel is safe.
Hmm.
That's what we're looking for. Like just having this, we call it the Williams huddle in my house. Um, that's the key word, is safe. Do your staff members feel safe in that environment that
mm,
you have and hired them for, invited them into? I think you're right. We can ask questions, and some companies do have you fill out a form that also identifies that. One thing that I want to make sure I point out too is the other thing that we look at for a resident is their anxieties,
Hmm.
their risk for injury in the first 3 to 6 months in our facility.
mm,
We don't even think about that for a caregiver, right? We just throw them on in there. And if there's one error being made, like you use like a 3 strikes you're out type process, but in a resident situation, we almost anticipate that anxiety and fear and all of these adjustments will be there and present in that transition. And we
mm.
never even think about that from a caregiver standpoint coming into a new culture. So beyond just asking questions, just like we spend time with that, it's important to understand, what do they want? I got to work with James Lee, who is the founder and CEO of Bella Groves, and I loved working with him because that's what our team did. We actually deep dive, like you're doing, Jordan, statistics, understanding the pain points of the community of our staff. So when we did present some form of development or solution and to help them feel engaged in our community, we weren't just speaking what we think. Like you were saying, Rachel, like this commercial, like I don't even shop at Macy's. Hello, it's too high. I'm always on a budget, even if I have
So
it.
good.
Yes. Like you're totally missing it. We window shop first and we wait for this to be marked down like at least 80%. Like you really have to understand the demographic that you're talking to. Because otherwise
100%.
you're reading from a script, right?
Yes.
And it feels that way and it goes over their heads. And guess what? I love to say this. Would you think they don't know when you're behind closed doors? That conversation and that mood and that that attitude, it flows through the hallways. The people that were the minorities, if you want to call them minorities, people of color, were very intuitive. And we understand if you trust us and if you don't.
I just want to let that sink in wow. 100%.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I feel like actually we've given a lot of assignments. And so I want to actually recap all the things that we've talked about, because there are other things and that we haven't talked about, like xenophobia, like how you have that racism may not be racism. It may be xenophobia, because we have these relationships with caregivers and residents. And sometimes they go head to head. And oftentimes we take the side of the resident and we don't, like you said, anticipate the anxiety, anticipate the ignorance. And ignorance shouldn't be a bad word.
It shouldn't.
Anticipate where they don't know maybe some conflict resolution.
Yes.
Like have conflict resolution training so that, and then have safe spaces, like safety, like you were saying, creating safe spaces for them to, okay, this resident just called me something out their mouth that was not okay. So I can go to this room, and you have this room for safe space.
Yes.
Because
I love that.
I mean, with privilege, you get to grow up seeing different ways of handling someone who has some sort of psychological or neurocognitive setback.
Yes.
If you go to a nice school, you see nice programming for people who have learning disabilities.
Yes.
If you grow up in the areas where typically our heroes and our caregivers grow up and currently live, they don't have those resolution training and all of that. So they do what they have to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
So going back and kind of what you said creating safe spaces.
Definitely.
Doing these move-in check-ins. And they don't have to be as expensive as they are for residents, but like doing the move-in check-ins. Could you go over a little bit more of the other things that you had mentioned? Because I want our viewers to see how they can start and having these conversations and what they can start doing. I want this to be really prescriptive, because this is something not large, like fixing CNA pay wages. This is something you can do in a huddle that just like, hey, we're going to try and have some more DEIB. That's why I love the B is added to DEIB is belonging. We're going to have more belonging.
Yeah.
So please give us your prescriptive, like, what can you do tomorrow?
Definitely. I think ask the right questions. We talked about questions, but it's really about really thinking through what questions will give you the most knowledge about the people that you are inviting into your organization is very important, because for us, it becomes very dismissive if you ask something very superficial. So I'm just say that. Two, I would also say, why not educate our residents about the different cultures though? Why can't it be both and? Yes, create a safe space. I would love to see like this whole movement of safe spaces, and where there's no retaliation. Two, there's an understanding of the differences of expression of emotion, and that we have a right to express our emotion. But also, why not have a weekly or monthly thing where even the residents themselves who may not have an understanding of the different cultures get an opportunity to know the people that is actually providing that care? That would be also amazing. Number two, get on the ground with your staff. The better you can be with them, the more you can understand them. And I don't mean in a authority way, but as a teammate. Let's do this together, because you're going to hear more, you're going to see more, and you're going to be able to understand how to engage. You're going to be able to look at a staff member in their eyes and know they're off because something is going on at home. It has little to do with the job, and it's hard to separate the two, even though we've been taught to do that. So hopefully that helps.
And I want to challenge, and I realize we're running over time, so I do want to say this. It doesn't have to be you going in and having those one-on-ones and seeing your staff, because honestly, you being in administration, being in the corporate office and going to the office and looking someone in the eye, knowing their name is going to help, but it's not going to help on the day-to-day because you're not there day-to-day. But empower your leaders that are on the floor to make these decisions and empower them and put them in situations where they have to have these conversations.
Definitely.
Laura, thank you so much.
This was a good one.
We will have to have you back every time we say that. I think like every conversation has been great for the past 3 or 4 weeks. It's been wonderful.
Incredible resources.
So much.
Thank you. So good.
I hope some people are hired. I hope that people are looking at this and going, I want someone that was trained by her.
Yes.
Yeah, you're doing some great work, Laura. And thank you again for joining us. I so appreciate it. And guys, tune in every Wednesday. Jordan and I are going to be here having these conversations. They are not always easy, but they are so important. And I think it is a great step, dare I say, even leap forward to make the industry better. So Laura, thank you again. Jordan, as always, thank you for joining us. And guys, we